The Shop 3 Sheep Eater. Written and read by W.P. Thrift, who can be contacted at Lantis Armstrong on Twitter. And cover art created by JD, contactable at Radix_L on Twitter. Chapter 1. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh knew he didn't belong in this office complex anymore, and would be met with the greatest of disdain if anyone spotted him. Luckily, he had cost virtually everyone their jobs, leaving the building largely vacated at the present. He had something to pick up, then he would be on his way. As long as his still lingering boss didn't spot him, he would be safe. So much sweat was beading on top of his head, almost no hair to stop it from soon freely running down his face. While he did have very curly, fiery orange hair, it only circled around the back of his head, leaving a large bald spot in the dead center and up front. He had tried using hair gel to force it all to comb over, but short of a straightening perm, he'd never be able to force his hair to cooperate and do anything but stick out as pervasively as a clown's wig. He wore a dirty white button-up shirt, which was unkemptly tucked into his khaki pants. His shoes didn't match. One was black and one was brown. His socks were different colors too, but that was slightly harder to tell. His clothes were pockmarked with coffee stains and streaks of drool from when he was sleeping, sitting up in the driver's seat of his car in an abandoned parking lot. There was a maze of maybe 40 cubicles in here, all empty now. He would have felt bad for costing everyone their jobs, but he was too busy worrying about his own livelihood. In his mind, the fact that he had lost his own job as well was more than enough penance for the catastrophe he had brought upon Cattellville Daily, the local newspaper where he had worked for his entire adult life. Mostly he had worked as a custodian, but when they gave him the chance, 6 months ago, to be a reporter after he had spent years talking his boss into it, all it took was one little series of completely made-up nonsense to ruin Cattellville Daily's reputation and run the entire place out of business. His boss gave him a list of people to interview, and Gilgamesh had set out to do just that. Only he didn't know how to read maps, and addresses meant nothing to him. He couldn't figure them out. So he just went home, popped in his favorite Miyamoto Musashi film, and jotted down a few lines from it as quotes from the people he was supposed to have interviewed. Honestly, the fact that it took everyone so long to tell the difference spoke more about their own levels of incompetence than Gilgamesh's. Crunch. Someone standing across from Gilgamesh took a large bite out of an almost glowingly bright red apple. Somehow, Gilgamesh didn't notice nor react to this. The man stood there, dressed in a blindingly orange Hawaiian shirt. The shirt had more black on it than orange, but somehow that made it seem brighter. He also wore stained dress pants, perhaps even filthier than Gilgamesh's, but his shoes were polished, spotless. Despite being inside with most of the lights turned off, he wore sunglasses. Yellow gunners, to be specific. His dark brown hair was a mess. It hadn't been combed in days. He slowly chewed the apple as Gilgamesh, who was shaking like a French poodle, roamed past him, looking around carefully for any sign of life. He didn't want to get caught, and was somehow utterly unaware of the person he was walking past. The man in the nice shoes sneered at Gilgamesh as he went by, a long-held grudge boiling up inside of him. Arriving at his office on the corner, an office granted to him out of the mercy of the boss who had come to believe in him, Gilgamesh let out a sigh of relief that he had yet to be spotted. His name was still embroidered upon a plaque on the door, but only because nobody was left working here to have replaced him. He looked through the wavy glass, and his heart sped up tremendously. His shaking intensified. Jogamesh flailed backwards, pressing hard against the wall, his head turned towards the office door as his chest heaved. His boss was in there, sitting in his old desk. The man in nice shoes now stood right beside him, facing him. He took another bite from the apple. Jogamesh still had not noticed him.
"How did I get myself into this mess?"
Jogamesh thought to himself. His script was right there on the desk. Soon as he had learned that Cattailville Daily would be letting go of all of its employees to do a bit of restructuring, he had begun to look for a new job. And yes, restructuring. It wasn't shutting down. The boss, Harvey, had lived in this town for over 200 years, and he wasn't about to let go of this antiquated business now. And yes, 200 years. This town was infested by monsters, and Harvey was believed to be counted among their numbers, despite appearing human. But none of that mattered to Jogamesh right now, who needed to get his script. The script was the key to his new job. Lead actor in an upcoming play being put on by the recently reopened Cattailville Theater. It was under new management, and was currently undergoing renovation. The new owner, a homeless man of 5 years who had recently come into money, was trying to bolster the theater's staff. Jogamesh had given him the exact pitch he had given Harvey and used to get the promotion from custodian to journalist. And once again, it had worked. But on his last day of work at Cattailville Daily, he had forgotten to bring his script home with him. Clearly, Harvey had figured this out and was waiting to have a chat with him. There was no way around it if he wanted to get his script back. So Jogamesh did what he always does when confronted with a challenge. He ran away. He spun. The man with the nice shoes was no longer there. Yet only now did Jogamesh get the feeling that he was being watched. He freaked out and began jogging in place for a long moment before he charged back towards the fire escape, which he had used to access the top floor of this building, then barged back out into the alleyway and ran for his car. He needed to get back to the theater where it was safe. The rusted metal door swung open and clanged loudly against the cement wall inside of the theater. Normally a cement block on the inside held the door shut, so Jogamesh had used too much force when he tried to push it open. His new boss, Austin, was on the stage, using a power screwdriver to unscrew some more boards, with a pile of boards just beside him which he had already pried up from the stage. Due to all the noise from the power tool, he didn't notice Jogamesh's return, so Jogi quickly closed the door, spotted the cement block, and shoved it back over to keep a breeze from swinging the door back open again. He had entered from a side door, and quickly made his way over to the first bench on the left-hand side of the theater. 30 rows of benches lined up on both sides, giving the theater an almost church-like atmosphere. The roof was as far overhead as a gymnasium ceiling would be, with a swarm of bats clinging to it, all of them annoyed at the noise Austin was making. Jogamesh looked for a spot on the bench that wasn't quite as wet as the rest of the benches. The dilapidated roof frequently leaked down on all of the seats. He found one, took a seat, and the bench immediately split in half. While it made little noise due to its sogginess, the unwarranted scream of terror to escape Jogi's lips when he fell 1.5 feet was loud enough to finally send the bats flying and to get Austin's attention. Austin stopped what he was doing, turned off the power tool, and lifted up his protective goggles as he stood and turned around to see what all the screaming was about. Jogamesh sat there on the floor with a panic-stricken expression.
"Oh, don't worry about that bench,"
Austin said absent-mindedly.
"I need to have them all removed and replaced with decent seating soon, anyway." "Of course I knew that,"
Jogamesh said, forcing himself back up off the floor.
I was gonna get started breaking them for ya! With your butt?
Austin was confused.
Never mind. You're late today. Where have you been?
Gilgamesh panicked, despite there being zero anger or concern in Austin's voice. It was a booming voice, sure, but everyone in his family spoke like that.
Oh, I had to be late today!
Gilgamesh said before he even knew why he had to be.
Because, you see, what happened was, I got to my car, and there was a note in it. A suicide note. It was left for me by my girlfriend, who said how much she loved me and how I was the only thing keeping her on this planet. But her parents, they just hate me so much for no reason, you see. They wanted to tear us apart. So she was gonna end it all. I drove to her house as fast as I could, and I arrived just as she was swan diving off the roof. It was horrible. I'll never forget how it looked.
Austin gasped.
This just happened? My God, man! Why are you even here? Shouldn't you be at the hospital with her? I have a cell phone with me. What is her name? I will call the hospital and tell them to expect you. Her name's... Look, I can't go to her. I really want to more than anything. But she has amnesia. She can't remember me. She can't remember me at all. And her parents, they're already there. They won't let me see her. And I can't prove to anyone who I am because of her amnesia. That is outrageous. Tell me her name. I will get in touch with the mayor's office immediately. My brother was good friends with the mayor. We will sort this out for you. That I can swear,
Austin declared, thunderstruck that such a thing could have happened.
The thing is, I never knew her name. We were so madly in love. I always just called her by the pet name, Sweetie. Sweetie? Yeah, and she never told me her last name. She said my last name was her last name, as far as she was concerned. So I don't even know what to call her parents, let alone her.
Austin just found this perplexing.
And you knew her for how long? Wait, why are her parents so controlling? Aren't you, 40 years old? How old was she? I don't want to think about this anymore. Can't you see that it's torn my heart out?
Gilgamesh bellowed.
Let's just focus on our work here. That's the only way I could possibly get over it.
Austin was so confused now, but he nodded slowly. Austin A. Austin. The A also stood for Austin. 5 years back, he had the world in his pocket, moving out of his parents' house after finishing 2 years of technical college, and believing that anything was possible for him. He was going to move here, to Cattailville, with every last dollar to his name being spent on the bus ticket. But that didn't matter, because his older brother, Paul Austin, was a big shot over here. He owned 3 stores. That was phenomenally wealthy compared to everyone else in this crappy town. However, upon arriving, he learned that his brother had been, tragically, murdered. And given that Austin had broken all ties and burned all bridges with his hometown and family before moving here to live with his brother, he found himself stranded in Cattailville, homeless because all of his brother's assets were to be sold off to pay for the endless bills he had racked up owning 3 failing stores. But, as luck would have it, that wouldn't be the end of Austin's life. He got a call from a certain heavy-breathing businessman recently. Well, the call didn't go to him, necessarily. Rather, a payphone began to ring, and when he answered it, the voice on the other line made him an offer he couldn't refuse. A bigger infusion of cash than he could have ever dreamed of, in exchange for a certain favor.
Just be sure that you hire that Gilgamesh guy. That just ruined the Cattailville Daily.
the voice on the other end said between long, gasping breaths.
He was running a story on Relay about something that I'm interested in.
Austin had no idea who it was, but when he went by the local bank, sure enough, an account had been opened in his name, with tens of thousands of dollars in it. Austin immediately withdrew enough to rent out a place to live, get himself cleaned, shaved, and well-dressed for the first time in half a decade. He couldn't believe that it had been so long. It was 2006 already. It was only 2001 when his brother was murdered. How had he lost so much of his young life? And now Austin was dressed sharply, with slicked back black hair and a devil's goatee he had shaped his long, homeless man beard into instead of shaving it all off. And he wielded the cocky look of someone who believed that all their hard work was starting to pay off. He had even hired Gilgamesh, just as his benefactor had asked of him, hired him to come on board as the lead star of the play he had planned to put on, because Austin wasn't going to let that money go to waste. Oh no, he was investing it into Cattailville Theater, where he fully planned to make all of the money he invested back, and then some. He would make his name here. He would make his fortune here. Everything he had always dreamed of was finally coming to pass, as far as he knew. Gilgamesh just stood there being completely useless as Austin turned around on stage and got back to work. The second the power screwdriver was turned back on, the metal side door was shoved back open again, unnoticed by both men. The man with the nice shoes entered the building, and then shoved the door back closed again, pushing the cement block up against it. He went to go sit down on the front bench, but noticed it was snapped in half. So he opted for the one right behind it. He had had his fill of apples, so he pulled out a pack of cigarettes. It was a soft pack, not a box, so in trying to open it, the entire top broke open. That was fine right now, but soon as he put it back in his pocket, they were all going to start spilling out and breaking. He groaned at the thought, but it couldn't be helped. Placing a cigarette in his mouth, something unusual happened in response. Every single shadow in the room, the shadow of every bench, every bat flying around the ceiling, even the shadows of Austin and Gilgamesh, they all pointed at him, jaggedly. They twisted like thousands of accusing fingers, and they were all sharp, threatening. "You're fucking kidding me!" The man with the nice shoes groaned, but didn't sound at all like this was entirely unexpected. He put the cigarettes back in the pack, and then put the pack away. The shadows all slowly withdrew, returning to their original shape. "Great, now I'm feeling fucking pissed. Are you happy now, you old bitch?" The man in the nice shoes hissed. The shadows, which would follow him for eternity, as they always had, vibrated against the wall, as though something were laughing at him, something unseen, ethereal. "God damn you!" Austin turned off the power screwdriver and glanced back at Gilgamesh, who was still doing nothing useful.
I thought I just felt a chill in the air. Oh, it's nothing. Never mind,
Austin said. Then, to Gilgamesh,
"Say, as long as I have you here, how are your lines coming along?" "All of them are memorized,"
Gilgamesh declared at once.
"Just like I told you in the interview. I'm very, very smart. Only needed to flip through them all once, and I had it down. Like, oh.
Gilgamesh struggled to recall anything. He hadn't read past the first page, and had no idea what the play was even about. He couldn't even recall the name of the play, or his character's name.
"The wolves are coming!"
Gilgamesh suddenly recalled.
"Oh, that's right. That was the first line. You know, you couldn't have picked a better person for this play. When I was younger, I was attacked by wolves. I had a wooden stick, and I fought 'em all off, just like Miyamoto Musashi. whom I was personally trained by. He's my mentor and hero, you know. In fact, he said that I was his successor. I basically am Miyamoto Musashi. Put a sword in my hand, and I can beat anyone.
Austin was perplexed by this.
Gilgamesh, the play is about two rival gangs. The Wolves are the name of your character's rival street gang. I knew that,
Gilgamesh said without skipping a beat.
I just told you I was the member of a real-life gang when I was growing up, fighting wolves with wooden sticks. It's all legit street lingo. That's why you don't understand it, because I'm so street.
A nervous itch crawled around Gilgamesh's body. Austin began to worry about taking Gilgamesh at his word, but his benefactor had assured him that this was the best choice. Plus, Austin just had a good feeling about him, and his feelings had never been wrong before. Except, of course, for all the times they had been. But he took where he was now in life to reassure himself that everything had been for the best. Thus, every decision he had made was right. The man in nice shoes, however, may disagree. He held a pamphlet in his hands, glancing over all the details. He had been coming here for the past week, observing Austin and Gilgamesh. He knew how long they had been working, and how far they had to go, and also how short of time they had left. Austin had opted for deconstructing the entire playset, and he was now essentially planning to rebuild everything in this room from scratch. Of course, Austin had barely even begun to take the floorboards apart, and the first day of the play was in 2 weeks. Opening night, 2 weeks. He had barely started deconstructing everything, let alone figuring out how to go about reconstructing anything, and Gilgamesh was still the only actor he had hired. Yep, a sound plan from start to finish. The power tool cut back on again as the man in nice shoes said, "This is gonna be an unmitigated disaster." But nobody heard him. The room shook. The screwdriver went off again immediately, and Austin whirled around on his bent knee. Gilgamesh freaked out, peed a little, and ran to duck under a bench in case this was an earthquake. He misjudged his dive and banged his head on the bench, and began moaning and wailing, while holding his forehead and kicking his legs, almost as though he were riding a bicycle while laying on his side. The room shook a second time, and a third. Something was over there, in the lobby of the theater, causing the entire place to shake. Austin panicked and checked his watch. It had just turned dark out. Not that he couldn't see from in here, but for one fear-stricken moment, he worried that he had lost track of time and it was after midnight. Cattailville was incredibly dangerous after midnight. That's when all the really bad monsters came out. A thunderous, ear-splitting fart from the lobby blasted the giant double doors open, which led into the main room. A torrent of dust, which was kicked up by the fart, stormed into the room, creating a foggy entrance for the intruder, who lumbered along slowly, his brontosaurus-sized legs hammering down on the ground. He appeared to be a 7-foot-in-diameter beach ball wrapped in a polo shirt, and nothing else. But as the dust settled, dozens of reaching, grabbing thorns could be seen, clawing at the floor beneath his shirt, grabbing at the floor, helping to pull him along as he lumbered. Barbed vines also extended up from the collar of his shirt, holding up glasses. The creature stopped, reached up with 2 humongous hands, and pulled his polo shirt down. A pumpkin-sized head appeared, popping out the top of the shirt, and the glasses dropped down onto his wide, happy face. His grin was huge, far too huge to be human. He had many yellow and black teeth lining his grin, each tooth bigger than Gilgamesh's fists. A giant hand reached up to try and comb down his scruffy black hair, but all the vines reaching up from the top of his polo shirt made it hard to reach, so eventually he gave up.
Austin,
the creature bellowed.
Is this what you've done with all the money that I gave you? Bah. This is stupid.
Austin was dumbfounded, but he clearly recognized the voice. Those wheezing breaths.
You're the one that opened that bank account for me!
Don't be stupid. Of course I did. You're so stupid.
The creature blathered. His bulging eyes rotated in his head, disconnected from one another, but they finally both settled on the bench Gilgamesh was hiding behind.
Gilgamesh! Get up! I'm here to talk to you.
Me? No! 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 No!
Gilgamesh was horrified.
Stop wasting my time. We've got a boat to catch.
His voice boomed. Gilgamesh jumped to his feet, standing at attention and shaking.
What do you want from me?
You and Austin are coming with me on a boat. And who are you?
He turned to look at the man with the good shoes. The man was very surprised by this. There's no way you see me.
Who are you talking to?
Austin asked, as he and Gilgamesh both couldn't take their eyes off of this monster. Like all the monsters in Cattailville, he was very likely dangerous. I'm Bialy, the man in the nice shoes replied. Who the fucking hell are you? His grin went even wider, but he didn't answer. He was the one in charge here, and he'd not be taking orders from some scrub.
You can join me too, then. Bah.
The monster told him.
I think that 3 people is just the right number for my crew.
For what crew? What are you going on about?
Austin asked, increasingly leery of this monster.
You're just gonna have to cancel your play.
The monster ordered.
Done!
Gilgamesh said very quickly. He was extremely happy that he had just dodged the bullet here. He was already planning to sneak out at the last minute with his paycheck, leaving Austin with a ruined, deconstructed set and no actors. Austin's lamentations would have been the thing of legend, and Gilgamesh would have burned one more bridge in his life. But if it had to be cancelled, then Gilgamesh could fully get away with all of his lies. For once.
Remember the article that you published a few weeks ago about your taking a boat to visit Rayleigh?
The monster asked him. Gilgamesh's heart sank. He had completely made up the entire story. He was sitting on his couch eating potato chips all weekend, then forgot to set his alarm Monday morning. When his boss rang him up to yell at him for not showing up, Gilgamesh made up a story about taking a boat out to Rayleigh and being attacked by a monster while there on the spot. His boss told him that that sounded amazing and he wanted an editorial on it written up and on his desk by Tuesday morning. Thus, the Song of Gilgamesh was written and published.
Yeah, the secret island that lies at the oceanic point of inaccessibility.
Right. It's also called Point Nemo.
The monster said.
I need you to lead me there and show me what you found. Brrr.
What is this exactly?
Austin asked. It's a point in the ocean that's the absolute furthest from any land, Bialy explained. That story's bullshit, though. There's no island there. By fucking definition, there are no islands there. What part of furthest from... never mind. Fuck it. It's not even worth the migraine explaining it.
Of course I'll bring you there,
Gilgamesh said.
Just please don't eat me.
Eat you?
The monster was surprised.
That's stupid. I don't eat people. I only eat... dreams.
Gilgamesh stupidly began laughing along, not wanting to appear stupid by not getting the joke. No one else laughed, and soon the monster stopped and just glared at him.
I already have the boat ready to go. You three are now my crew, the gung-ho sheep,
he declared.
Oh wait, that's stupid. I haven't told you my name yet. I am Sheep Eater. I'm your new boss. Now pack up your shit and let's go.
3?
Gilgamesh turned to ask Austin, but Austin ignored the question.
I guess I do owe him. Sure, what harm could a little boat ride be? I'll postpone the grand reopening of Cattellville Theater for when we get back. You'll still be up for starring in the lead role, yes? Oh, of course! Man, I'm so good at my role! If only you could have seen me rehearse!
Gilgamesh told him quickly.
Anyway, I'm so excited for our new task! Just give me a minute to get some stuff out of my car, and I'll be ready to go!
Then Gilgamesh scrambled out of the theater back to his car to jump behind the wheel, crank up, stomp the gas, and peel out of the parking lot, quickly enough to leave a black streak on the gravel where he had spun out. He needed to get as far away from that monster as possible, before the fact that he was a fraud was discovered. Out of town, off into the country road, Gilgamesh traveled. Bialy sat in the back seat, casually eating an apple, wondering why Gilgamesh didn't simply turn the rearview mirror and notice him there. Pulling into a truck stop hours later, Gilgamesh parked, let the seat go all the way back, and closed his eyes. He was used to sleeping in his car by now. He had been kicked out of his apartment shortly after losing his job, when his landlord learned that he'd no longer be able to pay rent. That horrible monster still danced in his head as he fell asleep, to the sound of 2 truckers fighting over a hooker. And soon the monster was all he could see, everywhere. In his dreams, the world itself was now the head of that grotesque creature, as was the moon in the sky, enormous overhead, as though it were seconds away from crashing into the planet.
I told you I eat dreams, little Jogi. Don't be stupid. We're waiting at the dock for you.
Sheep-Eater told him, the enormous mouth on the moon moving in sync with the enormous mouth on the planet, his drool rushing out like a tidal wave, threatening to crash down on Gilgamesh and crush him in that most foul substance. Gilgamesh screamed himself awake. Only a minute had passed. He couldn't believe it. He was so tired, so very tired. Maybe Sheep-Eater really was a sleep-eating monster, after all, and now Gilgamesh was haunted by that monster's strange power. Or maybe that wasn't it at all. Either way, he was wired now, unable to get back to sleep, and sleep-deprived enough to be capable of making a terrible decision.
No, I can't go back to the dock. It's midnight. I can't go back that way now. But I can't go to sleep.
Just take the off-ramp on the interstate. It leads straight to it, without passing through the town at all. Bialy muttered to him, also waking up from a nightmare involving Sheep-Eater demanding to know where he thought he was going.
Oh, I guess there's always the off-ramp,
Gilgamesh considered. He hated this, and he couldn't believe he was even considering it, but Gilgamesh cranked back up his car and drove away from the truck stop, off to the shipping docks where Sheep-Eater and Austin now waited for them, already loaded onto the boat. Gilgamesh had only one small suitcase he had stolen from work, with everything he owned in the world stuffed into it. It'd be all he unloaded once he got there, and accepted his newfound fate as Sheep-Eater's tour guide. Gilgamesh prayed he'd be able to find some island far out there in the ocean, any island, and then he would point to it as the one he had found. Again, like Bialy had ranted, by definition there was nothing at all out there, but that would never deter Gilgamesh from hoping all the same. That concludes Chapter 1 of Sheep-Eater. Tune in every Tuesday for new chapters. and please subscribe to be notified the moment they're released. If you would like to reach me, you can do so at Lantis Armstrong on Twitter. That's LANTISARMSTRONG. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again for next week's chapter, The Return of the Shop.